What's going on, friends? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I had a one-on-one sit down with Matt Bussell, the founder of Whalesync, and we had a talk about an AI tools directory that they built as a lead generation tool for Whalesync. So here is what it looks like. It has over 1,000 different tools, and it's a simple one-pager. So whenever you click onto one of the tools, it will actually just direct you directly to the site. And they created the entire thing in 1 week. And in our conversation, we really dived into, the technical setup of it all. What tools did you use? How is data, transferring between all of the different platforms? How do you find all of the original data that you populate in your directory, and a whole bunch more. So for anyone who has ever thought about, building a simple directory, just getting started, this is a really fantastic use case of it. They've really done a good job with this, and I think it's something that is a perfect starting point for anyone interested in directories. Now, before we get into the interview, I do want to share a quick little update on the local directory playbook. So over the last few weeks, I have been onboarding the first few people who joined the waitlist, and we've now got a few people building out their first directories. Now, with this, I actually decided that I wanted to go down a slightly different angle to the one I have in the past, and instead of just giving you a ton of tutorials to watch and to kind of do yourself, I actually wanted to kind of personalize the experience a bit more. So the way that it will work is as you're signing up, there will be like a little questionnaire where you can basically tell me all about your directory idea. And what we'll do then is we'll take whatever information you give us, and we will build you a custom roadmap, which will be individual steps that you can take in order to get your directory from, say, an idea to launch. Now, this is kind of what your roadmap will look like. And throughout all of it, what you'll do is you'll be going through different tasks that, as you are completing them, will unlock the next few modules and all that kind of stuff. The main reason why I wanted to do that is because I want to encourage people to actually do the work rather than to just watch the videos. But yeah, the first thing that we'll do is we'll start off by building out the homepage of your directory, kind of like the, basically the landing page, I suppose. And this will be really an introduction into, how do I build a website? So if anyone has never built a website before, this will kind of be like a fun little starting point. And so you'll see in here, you'll have like a bunch of tasks that you need to complete. And then within that, there'll also be individual tutorials where I'll kind of, explain to you how to use certain types of tools in order to build the types of features that you want. Now, as you're going through this and as you're unlocking more things, you will also get access to resources that I'm creating. So for example, in here, when we start working on creating your listing page, for example, you'll get access to a custom Reloom library that I created, where you'll get access to like templates that you can just copy and paste into your Webflow project. And then, also, as you're starting to dive into, say automation side of things, I actually just give you a bunch of the make.com blueprints. So you can just come in here and it will basically download it to your computer. There you go. You just go ahead, you click on the download button, and then you can import it straight into make.com. You'll get access to scripts, a whole bunch of different things. And so the idea is, of course, to teach you how to do certain things, but also I want it to be easy and kind of somewhat straightforward to implement. Now, if you are interested in joining, we're still in waitlist mode at the moment, but what I am doing is I'm sending everyone a form to basically give me the high level of what their directory is all about. And if I think that what we have right now is a good fit for your directory, then I'll email you back, give you access to it, and you can get started. With that being said, let's dive into why we're all here, which is my one-on-one chat with Matt Bussell from Whalesync. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you back for the next one. Bye. What's going on?
Not much. How are you?
Doing very good. Now, this is really like the first time that I'm doing like an interview type thing, but obviously I've been using Whalesync heaps. Plus, you've built a directory, and I'm loving my directory videos right now, so I thought we'd chat about it. But just for anyone that might be new to Whalesync, can you give us like the 80-20 of what Whalesync does and how it kind of fits into like the directory / no-code world?
Absolutely. So Whalesync lets you edit your data in different apps like Webflow, Supabase, HubSpot from a spreadsheet. So places like Airtable, Notion, and Sheets. So we see a lot, especially with directories, as people connecting website builders like Webflow to backends like Airtable, and essentially building their directory by collecting a ton of data in that database, in that Airtable spreadsheet, using Whalesync to sync it into their website and basically managing the whole directory there.
Yeah. Do you remember how we met for the first time? It was probably one of the funniest like interactions because I think I was like, I don't know, I was like right into like making my YouTube videos about no code tools, and before the good old Whalesync days, like I was mostly using Zapier, and we met at the no code conference, and you said to me, we watched plenty of your videos and we thought, man, it could be you could do automation way simpler than that. You nailed it. Like I use time now, so I love it.
I appreciate it. And you were also very nice. I hope you weren't thinking, "Oh my God, who are these people coming up to us and telling us they should use Whalesync?" But no, I'm glad you
No,
gave it a shot.
hey, no, honestly, like at the time, like this was like pre like AI coding era. So like I remember when I was doing it in Zapier, if you wanted to send like multi references to the Webflow CMS, you had to like write scripts. But because there were like no AI coding tools, it would take like a gazillion years to even come close to building something that would work. But no, it's for sure. I mean, when you guys launched, I mean, there were like a lot of automation tools out there already. I mean, Zapier was there. I mean, Integromat at the time was there. And then you also had like all of these other little ones there. So I was just kind of like, oh, yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to see like how Whalesync will fit into all of it. But I think what I think you guys nailed that I think some of the more traditional automation tools don't do as well is the syncing side of things, especially like syncing large amounts of data without having to constantly like trigger workflows here and there and all that kind of stuff. So just briefly before we dive into what you've been working on, can you kind of like give me like the rundown why you decide to go down that path of syncing rather than like a more traditional like automation tool?
Absolutely, yeah. So it really was just directly from users or potential users and customer feedback. So this was about 4.5 years ago now. My co-founder and I, Curtis, were basically just trying to talk to everyone we knew that was in the no-code space that was using these tools and saying like, "Hey, show us your problems. Like, what are you using?" And the thing that just kept coming up was everyone was using Zapier or Make or whatever else, but they all had a similar problem, which was like across the 20 apps that they'd set up, there was this one Zap that was like 30 steps long, and it was the one that was always breaking and always failing. And we'd say, "Okay, well, what's that one?" And just like you mentioned, it's like, well, I have this one that's about really just like taking what I have in Airtable and just constantly sending that data into Webflow, right? And really what they were describing was more of a sync as opposed to an automation. So they just wanted to share the data across these apps as opposed to building some like logic of like if this then that emails, right? And so we saw it enough times. We said, all right, as amazing as Zapier is, there should be a tool that isn't really built for automation, but it's built for actual syncing. It's just to literally let you say, I want to use Airtable as the CMS for Webflow. And yeah, that's kind of how we got into that.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I remember, especially with the whole Airtable to Webflow sync in Zapier back in the day, I don't even think the syncing was possible. Like, I'm sure there were kind of workarounds, but it would all be like one record at a time. And it would kind of like, if something would break, kind of weird. So, no, I think you guys have nailed it. Now, without wanting to talk too much more about it. So you are the kind of founders, or I suppose software company that actually uses your own product a lot, and you've built a directory. And so I figured, why don't you give us the rundown of the directory and how it works, and then we can talk about some of the tech behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me, I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can see it a little bit. But yeah, we, just like you mentioned, like we love to use our own product whenever we can. It's just a good experience to dog food it, and it lets us build some pretty cool stuff. And so one that we had literally just launched last week and we're super happy about is this product called the AI Tools Directory. So this is a directory of just over 1,000 different AI products. And maybe just quickly to give the problem that we encountered that we wanted to solve with this was every day there's a new AI tool that's launching and they're super powerful and they can really change your business, but it's impossible to keep track of all of them. And so I had like 50 Google Chrome tabs open constantly with these different tools that I wanted to try and keep track of. And eventually we said, you know what, there should be a directory where we can keep track of these and help other people share them. And so that is what we built. And you can kind of see here, we have filters. You can quickly dive into, let's say, just like finance tools or design tools. You can filter by tag as well if you want to get really specific. So if you're like, hey, I want to just look for like AI CRMs, looks like we have a duplicate here we got to fix, but you can do that as well. And of course, search works. But that's really the idea, and obviously happy to talk about how we built it. But yeah, we're happy to have launched it last week.
Yeah. So I suppose the first thing that I'd be interested in knowing is like, so I mean, you guys run a company. I mean, like, what is the idea behind creating a directory besides what you're doing with your company?
Yeah. In general, if we see a problem that it impacts our user base, right, or like potential user base, if we can solve it with Whalesync ourselves, like obviously that's the best. But if there's other ways we can solve it, we try to do that. And so this is one of a handful of different sort of, I'd say, like side products or side launches we've tried to put out there. Whether or not this is ultimately like a high ROI or not, can't say for sure. But for us, like we feel like if we keep putting out good stuff into the world that we wish existed, good things happen.
Cool. Can we have a little look at some of the like listing pages that you've created?
Yeah, absolutely. It really, so we took the approach here of like, let's just create a single page that has it all. So if you click on one of these as an example, it'll just take you right to the website.
Oh, right.
Yep, exactly. But again, we tried to make this part very powerful so that you could actually, utilize it. And so the search again is very powerful. So if we looked at like, let's say like chat, right? You can start to see not only just like ChatGPT, but also it'll search for tags that include things like chatbot. And then we've also tried to narrow this down to popular tools. So here's 45 tools that have raised, significant amounts of funding that are gaining a lot of traction in the software community. So a few different ways you can kind of work with things there.
Cool. Let's dive into a little bit of a kind of a tech background, like breakdown. So what are the tools that you used for this?
Yes. So maybe not surprising to you, but the tools that we find to be just the absolute best here are Webflow as the front end, and we can talk about the details of it, but the CMS here, everything is driven through that. So if you go into Webflow and look at AI tools, every one of those tools is listed in the CMS. The back end for this is Airtable. We were considering either Airtable or Notion. So both of those work with Whalesync, and both those can be connected to Webflow. But we felt like Airtable was the right tool, and we can talk about why. And so everything is in here. We have a bunch of different views, and again, all of the data is collected in these spreadsheets. And then lastly, Whalesync. So just to kind of square the circle there, Whalesync is what is connecting Webflow and Airtable so that I can use all the powers of Airtable, all the powers of the spreadsheet, but have it still show up directly on this directory.
Mm-hmm. Question about Webflow. So the domain that you're hosting this on, is this is this on like the whalesync.com domain, or did you create a whole separate domain?
Yes. So we put it on, we have basically it's whalesync.com/tools/AI directory. And we were thinking about splitting it out. We ultimately, just for SEO purposes, figured, if this gets some traction, it'll be nice for the main domain. But yeah, it's all here on whalesync.com.
Oh, so it's on your actual main site. You didn't create like a standalone project for it.
Exactly. Yeah, we wanted to keep it within the Whalesync, family.
Yeah, nice. I ask only because I've seen like a few like companies create directories in a similar way to you. But what I think a few of them did was they created like separate projects and then used like reverse proxies to point it back to their main domain and that kind of stuff. But I mean, obviously that works like a lot better. I think it's a lot more straightforward to do.
We tried to keep it simple, and even just across this whole project, we tried to time box the effort to 1 week, to say, hey, like let's just something as good as we can, but not have this take a month or two, which it easily could have with other tools.
Yeah, cool. I've got tons of questions. Okay, I think the first one, just the obvious one to get out of the way. So the search and filtering, what are you doing for that?
Yeah. So quick background on this, and I want to just give a shout out. So Corey Moen, who is the designer who built our website and built this as well, is just the genius mastermind behind every Webflow piece here. But yeah, he's using for a lot of the filtering here a handful of scripts that essentially handle a lot of the tricky bit. We considered something called Jetboost, if you're familiar with it, or I'm sure you're very familiar with it. But we felt like, as at least a starting point, we could kind of do the filtering ourselves. I think if we were to do a next pass on this, we'd probably upgrade to something like Jetboost.
Okay, so it's all like native filtering with scripts and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Nice. So, one of the things that I've started doing is I still use Finsweet attributes a lot because it's quite cool, but using Finsweet attributes with custom scripts is actually, you can just do like really next level things. Like one of the things that I did was, when it comes to populating the filters and stuff like that, I now populate it based on the actual data that sits in the cards. So instead of having to pre-populate all the different tags and then it sometimes show up with like no results, it basically populates it with the tags that are available on visible cards and stuff like that. And you can't do that natively in Finsweet, but if you like throw it through ChatGPT, it kind of writes you a nice little script for that. So that's pretty slick.
I love that. No, that's I have no doubt that is similar to how Corey built a lot of this.
Yeah. Corey, I'm actually going to get Corey on to talk about his directory at some point too. So in terms of the build, did Corey come in and build this directory for you, or did you build it yourselves?
So he built the Webflow side. He basically is the mastermind behind everything on our live site. We built the back end, so the entire Airtable process, the Whalesync side of that as well. And we can talk about it a little bit, but we also used a fair amount of Airtable AI to make, collecting 1,000 different tools, something we could do in a couple days as opposed to weeks.
Interesting. I definitely want to know about that. That's actually a nice segue into talking about the whole Airtable database setup. So the first thing you mentioned was you could have chosen Notion or Airtable. Why did you end up choosing Airtable specifically?
Yeah. So for a product like this, where the goal is to collect not just like 10 or 100 different tools, but 1,000 and hopefully even more from here, we felt like Airtable is better suited for that. They do a better job of just managing lots of data than the Notion databases do. They're maybe a little bit less visual, but for this project, really the only visual is the product image. Maybe I'll grab like one of these here, just so you can see what this looks like here. But yeah, this is really the only visual. So mostly it's about collecting a bunch of data and tagging it. And so, yeah, I'll just say that the large amount of data made us go for Airtable as opposed to Notion.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I tried. I mean, I can barely use Notion to like actually keep notes and stuff. So I just have everything. So I'm just like Airtable through and through. Even though I must say, ever since you started working with Supabase or having an integration with Supabase, I've actually been thinking about potentially using Supabase as a database tool because I think it gives you quite a bit more flexibility when it comes to like some of the automation and logic behind databases. But I think that's a topic for another day. I want to talk about how you found data, how you enriched all of your data. So yeah, what was your process behind it?
Yeah, let me give you the step by step. That way people can kind of copy this if they want. And I'll just say really quickly on the Supabase side, totally agree. And what we see a lot is people will use Whalesync to sync Supabase with Airtable, so they can collect a ton of stuff in Supabase, but still have this sort of nice, interface and dashboard here.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of using that to start this directory, really just like if you were going to copy this, what I'd recommend is first of all, just start getting, the whatever it is that you're collecting into a spreadsheet, right? Like that's just step one. And so we started to make our own list of just like, hey, concierge, pickle, whatever we could find. We had a giant list of different websites and newsletters and product hunt and places and resources to find these things. But it was like, all right, we just need to first get them in here. So we would grab the name and the URL. That was sort of the first part. From there, we tried to think about how to add descriptions that would be helpful. So if you go to the site, one thing you'll notice is that each of these tools has a very short description of it. So like Harvey, professional class AI agent, AI SDR agent, prompt engineering platform, right? We didn't want sort of like marketing speak on this because sometimes it's very hard to understand what a tool even is, why it's worth clicking. And so with that, we said, all right, well, first we'll just write our own descriptions. And so we did that for the first like 50 and realized, all right, this is not going to scale to 1,000. And so we worked from there to then say, okay, how can we do this in a more scalable way? And the way we did that is, let me go over here, is, and sorry to let me know if we're getting too much into the weeds here.
No, this is the weeds we need to be in right now. I love this.
All right, awesome. So what we did, we said, okay, well, we need to give the AI a way to write a description for us, because if you ask an AI to write a description about, brand new AI tools like, Whisper or Junebot, right? Like it just doesn't know them. And so it will just hallucinate and make stuff up. And so at first we just said, hey, like write a short description about the tool. And they were all, a mess, or at least half of them didn't make sense. So the next thing we said, all right, well, we need to feed these AI with something that is, useful to them. And so we actually scraped data from every website that's on this directory and scraped the title from the website, the description from the website, and the H1. And so maybe just to give an example, like here, MoveStacks, if we were to open this one up, right? It's got this H1 of simplifying cloud for builders. It's got a description, right? It had the actual site has a title that we can grab. If we come back into our Airtable, you'll notice it here, which is, there we go, the cloud platform, all in one, right? Simplifying cloud. When you feed that into the AI, it can then write a description that is, useful, right? Or at least a good starting point that we can, edit from there. So like here, it came up with cloud platform simplifying development, right? Like that at least makes sense and is, you can decide if that's something you want to click on or not. So that's how we got descriptions. Last bit on just this part, and then we can get into images and categorization. But in order to scrape this, we actually used Google Sheets. So not a tool that we actually use that often, but there is something called Google Sheets XML, and I think this will show it. Here we go. But basically, you can use Google Sheets to pull in data from different websites. So if I were to go and grab, like here's a good example, Supabase, let's just do this again. I'll drag this whole row down. Or actually, let's change this to like, I don't know, stripe.com. Let's see if that works. There we go. Okay, Stripe doesn't work, but it will basically search the website from your URL and scrape what you want. Maybe like Zapier will work, let's say. Nope. It's a little finicky, but yeah, if I do Whalesync, we should work. Nope. Let's grab this one.
This is live demos. This is how live demos work.
Live demos, exactly. But all to say that if you, I'll just link to this so you can kind of see yourself, XML, Google Sheets in general. This is a super helpful article. It's basically a set of, things you can add, the syntax here, into Google Sheets that will go and grab data. And again, it's a little finicky, so you have to do it exactly right. But essentially it'll search and scrape things. We would use Google Sheets to do that. We'd then copy it into Airtable. Once we copied into Airtable, we'd use AI to write the description. So
awesome.
I'll pause there. That was a very long.
Very interesting. Question about Airtable AI. So can you feed into the AI column the parameters of, say, like the title and the description?
Yes. So that's a really good call out and something to put here. So we fed into it. There's a very long one that says, hey, write a description that's less than 100 characters. And here are the inputs, just like we talked about, that title, that name, that H1, the URL. Airtable makes it really, really easy in their AI field to just reference these other fields that you filled in. And then you'll notice that as we did this, we would do, 5 or 10 at a time. We started to learn where it got good and where it was bad, right? And so we had to tell it like, here's what a bad description looks like. Here's what a good one looks like. Don't say this, don't say that. And through the process of just, again, iterating through this, we eventually got to a point where it got pretty good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. I've tried Airtable AI and I've kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that like, I feel like I get way better results when you can like custom pick your model from like, say, ChatGPT and stuff like that. But yeah, it's cool that you managed to get it work like this. This is super impressive. Just on a side note, this is like a random little question I have, I suppose, but as someone that runs an automation company, do you use any other automation tools yourself?
We do. We're very pro automation, and we really don't see ourselves as like, competitors as much as all kind of doing different things in the space. So we're customers of Zapier. We are customers of Relay.app. We're customers of Airtable AI. We're customers of Data Fetcher. So we love to use different automation tools.
Yeah, I love Data Fetcher. Data Fetcher is such an underrated tool. I mean, it's kind of hidden in the Airtable store a bit, but you can do such good stuff with it.
We're
They
big
actually,
fans, yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna make another video on it at some point because it's awesome.
And I'll just say real quick on that, what we also see is people use Data Fetcher to get data into Airtable from whatever API, and then they use Whalesync to sync it from Airtable into Webflow. And so you basically can get any sort of data you want that has an API into Webflow if you just use those two tools.
Yeah, 100%. Highly rate that. Okay, cool. How did you do the image? The
Yes,
thumbnail?
also a really good question. So let me call that out. And oh, sorry, just on the last bit on Airtable AI, is here they do let you pick different models now, and this is relatively new. We just use the default GPT-4o, but just because you mentioned it, is you can at least get a couple others if you're interested. That being said, it is expensive, so Airtable AI did require us to upgrade. I think we had to pay an extra $100 last month to build this site out.
Just for
Or something like
credits
that.
for the AI.
Just for credits. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
same thing here. It's like I used it once and it didn't even populate like my 100 rows. It was like, nah, upgrade now. And I'm like, I'm on the like business, I mean, I get it, like you're using like tokens to generate this, but if they had like a bring your own API key feature, that would be good.
I would definitely wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, I'd use it way more for sure. I mean,
100%.
in a way, I kind of do because I use Airtable scripts a lot. So I just like run like scripts where I've just got my own API key in there that just kind of runs through it all. But yeah, I mean, without wanting to be too critical of like companies who are improving their product, I mean, like I kind of feel like Airtable AI, it's like not great bang for buck, but it's just my opinion. Try it for yourself. Yeah, let's talk about the image.
Yes. So just like with the descriptions, it's one of those things where images are no big deal when you have a directory with 100, or 50 different, items. You just go and get them yourself, right? Like really no problem. When you want 1,000 or 2,000 is all of a sudden when you have to start to think about, okay, how do we like scale this up a little bit? So let me go ahead and cancel that there. The thing that we used, there we go. I don't know. Airtable's going to want, yeah, there we go. Cool. So the thing we used is an Airtable extension, and I might need to actually switch over to Chrome for this. Yeah. So give me one sec, and I'll stop the share and show this to you in Chrome. But I'll start to explain what I mean by it, which is we used a Chrome extension that basically lets us clip different site images directly into our tools database. So let me share the screen.
Airtable extension. I love it.
We got a lot going on here to make this actually come together. But yeah, now that I'm in Chrome, let me just open this up. So if you go to the extension store, it's called Web Clipper. But essentially, it makes you download a Chrome extension that's also called Airtable Web Clipper. But what that lets us do is if I go to a site, I'll go to stripe.com again. And if I click on Airtable Web Clipper, it will ask me which Airtable base that I want to send this web clip to, and it's the AI tool directory. It can ask you how you want to get the screenshot. So just take an image or add page screenshot here. There we go. And let's go ahead and add that record. And now when I open this up in Airtable, we have the record. It's called Stripe, and it has this image right here, right? Like perfectly formatted and all good to go. And so again, it's still for 1,000 of these, which is what we had to do. Like it's still manual. It's not something that took 5 minutes, but it made it possible to make it look professional and do in a couple days.
Yeah, love that. The web clipper, underrated. One of the things that you can do with the web clipper that's quite cool is targeting like CSS elements. So let's say, for example, not that we encourage scraping other websites, we wouldn't want to do that, but hypothetically, say you went to Product Hunt and you wanted to like pick some of their products off there, you can actually target certain elements by the CSS class so that you don't even need to click it. It just populates your web clipper for you with all the information based on the actual page that you're on. That I think only really works for like directory sites or like structured sites that have kind of like a consistent structure across different pages. So you can't really do it on like, I don't think it would work on something like Stripe because I mean, God knows how their like CSS is structured, but yeah. Awesome. Great way to do it. This is my preferred way of like getting like thumbnails and images in there as well. How about the tags and all that kind of stuff?
Great question. So, and by the way, it looks like someone on our team is doing a little work here, which is fun to see. But let me go ahead and close this out. We'll talk about tags. So, tags was definitely an interesting one. Let me see. Go to my view here and see if this is helpful. So, again, first of all, we just tried to ask the AI to do tags for us. And same thing with the descriptions. We realized pretty quickly that it just didn't know these tools that well, and so it wasn't going to be able to categorize them. So we decided, all right, let's focus on the descriptions first. So we now have a database for our directory that is, not only the tool, but also a description that makes sense. And then we can start to feed the AI and see what it would do for categories of its own. And so we copy and pasted about 300 of these into ChatGPT separately from this and said, hey, if you were going to tag these yourself, what would you do? And it created its own list, and we put into this separate table called tags. And you can see here everything from databases to coding agents to CRMs, right? It started to tag them. It did require a little bit of back and forth. Like as good as it was to get started with, there were plenty of tags that just either didn't make sense or duplicative. Even still, we could probably do a little bit of cleanup here. But yeah, it gave us like a starting point, and we put that into there. Once we had that for the first, couple hundred, we could then go into tools and have the AI basically for each one either generate a tag or a role. We had a very similar process. I won't go through it again in too much detail, but similar idea with roles, which was aside from like high level tags, we tried to say, hey, what are the 10 or so sort of just like roles that would make sense for this. We seeded it with a few of our own. It came up with its own, like I think data was one that it said, let's split that out. But again, started with a starting point of ChatGPT, feeding it all that it could. Once that worked, we brought it into Airtable AI and let the AI generate them as well.
I love it. That's so cool. On that note, do you have like any plans to expand your directory? Because like if you have like roles and stuff like that or tags, it seems like a good opportunity for like CMS landing pages, I suppose.
Great. Yeah, really good question. We considered that for the first rollout. And again, for the sake of saying, let's scope this down. Let's keep this tight and ship it and then kind of iterate from there. We decided to cut it. But yes, I do think that like, if we go to, let's see if I can get here, whalesync.com/tools AI directory. If we come back here, there's a pretty natural spot here as opposed to just filtering by roles, but instead being like, let's have a page for consumer AI tools and data AI tools that lives on its own.
I love it. That's kind of why I love this particular setup so much. It's because it's like, once you have like your main listing page up and running, you can just like copy and paste it everywhere, just apply some filters and you're pretty much good to go.
100%. And I'll just make the case for that again, which is that for anyone that's like, hey, I think I could collect this data and just do it directly in Webflow and not put it into Airtable. Aside from that taking way, way longer on its own for the first setup, the problem is that you're then sort of stuck with whatever you built. Whereas with the setup, with Airtable, with Whalesync, with Webflow, it's super flexible. If we want to change this, if we want to add another 1,000 tools, we're just like flip around the roles or something like that. It's all really easy to do.
Yeah, nice. Can we talk about Whalesync in this?
Sure.
So when I started using Whalesync, one of the main challenges that I had with it was that it was just a straight up sync. Like you add a record before it's completed, it just goes immediately into the Webflow CMS and there were definitely workarounds for it, but how do you make sure that as you're going through the different stages of finding data, enriching the data with images, all that kind of stuff, that you make sure that it doesn't get published immediately?
Yeah, such a good question, and it's great. It reminds me how far we've come from the early days. But yes, so you'll have noticed probably in looking at this Airtable that we have a bunch of different views and one called To Website. And basically, the way that we control this is, first of all, we collect a bunch of things until it makes it into this Airtable view of To Website. It doesn't sync. So Whalesync has an Airtable view feature that will only sync data if, in fact, it's in the view that you want. To make it into this view, it has to have certain things like a role, a tag, a description, an image. So those are good to go. The other bit, and then we'll use this a bit as well, is we also have a Webflow status field. So if you go into Webflow and we're to look at one of these items in the UI, so look at, let's say here, you'll notice it's published. You can, of course, unpublish it. You can archive it by clicking this button. All of that can be controlled from Airtable using Whalesync with this Webflow status field. So you can move something to active, which is like published, draft, or archived. And so if we're working on something that we don't want to be, live, aside from taking it out of the view, we might just say, you know what, let's move this to draft, make some updates, and then publish it again and have it go live.
Mm-hmm. And so just a quick one, only because I actually don't use the view parts that much. I mostly use filter, which works in a very similar way. But if you were to remove a record out of this view, does that automatically remove that item from the Webflow CMS?
Exactly.
Cool. And then it still sits in your Airtable database. So if you ever decide to republish it, it's still there.
Exactly.
Nice. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, I use filters for it, but I mean, I have used views before and it works just as well. The only thing with that is that then you cannot make edits inside of Webflow because it's a one-way sync, isn't it?
That's exactly it. And good call out. So a somewhat newer feature, maybe we launched this 6 months ago or so, but filters is something that essentially lets you do what you're describing is go into Whalesync and say, hey, I only want to sync data where, XYZ condition is true. And just like you're talking about, what that allows is you can have this filtering system, but also do a two-way sync. With the Airtable views feature we just talked about, the one, sort of drawback to that is that you get to, work with your view, but it does become just a one-way sync from Airtable into Webflow.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, I mean, this is a really great example of how you can use like a few tools to just build a really slick looking directory. So well done on that. There are like a few more things I wanted to talk to you about just in regards to like Whalesync and just also maybe I think one that I'm particularly interested in is that, like AI's taken off. I think that there are like a lot of no-code companies who are kind of looking at it and are kind of being like, how do we fit into the mix of all of this? What are some of the like changes that you're seeing in like maybe the way that your customers use Whalesync or, use cases that you might be exploring for something like Whalesync?
Absolutely. So we think about it in a couple different ways. So first of all, just today, like you talked about, how are customers, changing because of this? AI works really, really well on data, right? And so anyone that's using Whalesync is using Airtable, Notion, Google Sheets. They're working with a set of data. And so all of our customers, even if they're not thinking about themselves as like AI coders or anything like that, they are applying AI to their sets of data, right? So it could be something like we just talked about where, they're using AI to categorize stuff. It could be something like we've seen people write blog posts, right, with AI and then sync them between Notion and Webflow. But they're now starting to become more AI literate there. The other bit, like you also alluded to, is that when they need to build something themselves, they're becoming slightly more technical. Again, even if they don't realize it, by using scripts or having, ChatGPT write a little script to do stuff. And so the level of, think like why people come to Whalesync is now elevated, right? It's not just for that little kind of like quick here or there. It's for, hey, I want to just share this data across Webflow and Airtable. And so we, kind of see ourselves focused really, really highly there, where Zapier, Make, et cetera, do a really good job on sort of the lower level stuff. And then lastly, the way we think about it also internally is, can we use AI and put that into the product to make things simpler and easier? And so we haven't implemented any big features there yet, but later this year, I expect we'll add a handful of things to make the product more AI enabled as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Another thing is, I mean, one of the tools that's really been taking off lately with like, all the AI coding tools that have kind of been developed is Supabase. Have you seen like a lot of people in your customer base like using Supabase a lot more or?
Yeah, so a lot of our customers are what we call builders, right? So whether they're like a solopreneur, a no coder, or even working in a bigger org, there are people that like to just create stuff. And so we're seeing a lot of if you've heard of the term vibe coding, right? So like people using Bolt and Lovable to build things. The back end of choice for that tends to be Supabase right now because they have these integrations with those tools. And so someone will build an app, they'll use Supabase to be their database. And then they'll come to Whalesync and say, hey, now that I have the Supabase database, I'm not a developer, but I'd like to edit it. Airtable is the place I love to edit stuff. They'll use Whalesync to connect that Supabase database into Airtable. And so that sort of AI-driven vibe coding use case is definitely something we're seeing a lot.
That is so cool. Honestly, because one thing that you mentioned early on that I thought I agreed 100% is like, so Supabase is kind of technical. Like if you go in there, it's not like a nice looking interface, but the fact that you can basically immediately set up Airtable as like your admin portal, and that's essentially how I use Airtable nowadays. It's like my admin portal that syncs data between all the different tools that I'm using. So I kind of feel like with more and more people like using Supabase, having that Airtable Supabase sync is actually kind of like a good opportunity because,
We love it. It's again, like Supabase is certainly easier to click around in than like the traditional Postgres database, but you just can't compare to Airtable. And so yeah, with like admin panels with internal tools, that's hook set up between Airtable and Supabase is great.
Cool. Okay, two more little things. One is a question, and the second one is I need to point people towards a resource that you've created. The first one was, geez, now I forgot what it was because I was excited about the second thing. So one of the use cases that you've got your own YouTube channel, which everyone should check out. So it's the Whalesync YouTube channel. And one of the videos that you made that I thought was awesome is how you can use Whalesync to create programmatic SEO hacks. And specifically, you set up a tutorial on how Coinbase created all of their unique landing pages. So this ties into the original question. First of all, I'll link to that video. But second of all, with Whalesync, what are the most common use cases that you see besides directories?
Yes. So they really vary depending on which tools you set up, but just with Airtable and Webflow, a couple of the ones. So directories are huge. It's definitely like a big piece of here. Second of all, just like you called out, programmatic SEO. If you're not familiar with it, it's this concept of basically creating hundreds or thousands of SEO-driven landing pages. And this becomes really possible when you use the Webflow CMS, like we kind of just talked about, as a template page, and then use Airtable to collect a bunch of data for these tools. You alluded to the Coinbase one. It's a really good example of they have thousands or tens of thousands of these different pages that show different prices of different coins. Zapier is the king of this. They actually sort of pioneered a lot of this, which is they have thousands or tens of thousands of pages with different integration combinations. And then also add like local PSEO is a really common one, which is if you have a product that you're offering in multiple cities around the world or country, you can build a dedicated page for every single city. So like best law firm in San Diego, best law firm in New York, and make that all possible to roll out super quick.
Yeah. Yep. It's definitely an exciting space to be in. Matt, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for just showing us how you set up your directory. It is awesome. Also, amazing work with Whalesync. I'm a big fan. And yeah, I think we'll wrap it up here unless you have anything to add.
No, I'll just say thanks so much for having me on. We're huge fans of the channel and just awesome to get to chat again.
Cool. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Everyone, thanks for watching, and I'll see you back here for the next one. Bye.